What happens when one of Hollywood's biggest stars publicly mocks a young waiter, only to be silently taught a lesson by the most unexpected person? Tonight, you'll hear the story of Leonardo DiCaprio's shocking moment, and how Keanu Reeves' quiet act of kindness changed everything forever. This is a story about power, humility, and respect, and it's one you won't believe actually happened. The Golden Table. The night was velvet black, draped in diamonds of city lights and the low hum of Los Angeles glamour. On the 48th floor of one of downtown's most luxurious hotels, an exclusive after-party buzzed with whispers, laughter, and the occasional pop of champagne corks. The Oscars had just wrapped, and the A-listers had migrated here, where no reporters were allowed, no cameras clicked, and the real personalities emerged under the golden glow of custom chandeliers. The rooftop restaurant had been transformed into a sanctuary of celebrity opulence. Private tables with silk cloths, gold-edged menus, and a private jazz trio in the corner playing Coltrane deep cuts. The scent of truffle oil and aged scotch filled the air. Among the radiant chaos sat Leonardo DiCaprio, Hollywood's golden boy. He was surrounded by actors, producers, influencers, and the kind of people who seemed to appear at every exclusive event without anyone knowing exactly what they did. Leo looked every bit the star, tailored black tuxedo, sleeked back hair, and that effortless charm he'd wielded since Titanic made him a household name. But tonight, Leo wasn't acting. He was commanding. "Let's get another bottle of the 2000 Chateau Margaux," he called out, half laughing, half demanding. "And don't give me the 'we're out' story again like last time." His entourage chuckled. Everyone laughed just a bit louder than the joke deserved. That's what people did around power. Meanwhile, on the edge of the room, 23-year-old Marco adjusted his tie and took a deep breath. It was his first week on the job. He had studied the wine list twice, memorized celebrity names, and rehearsed smiling through pressure. But none of that prepared him for carrying a $4,000 bottle of wine to Leonardo DiCaprio's table. With steady hands and the kind of poise he hoped passed as confidence, Marco approached the table. The jazz music drifted around him, the conversations dimmed, and the moment slowed. Leo glanced up, watching the young waiter intently, his eyes betraying the mild amusement of someone watching a performance they assumed would fail. Marco leaned in to pour, carefully tilting the bottle at the right angle, just as he'd been trained. But nerves are funny things. His hand trembled ever so slightly. And that's when it happened. A small stream of wine trickled out too quickly, splashing onto the rim of the glass, and a single dark drop landed on the white linen tablecloth in front of Leo. Time froze. Leo raised an eyebrow, then sat back in exaggerated disbelief. "Whoa," he said loudly, drawing attention from nearby tables. "Are we under attack, or is this guy just trying to baptize me into the Church of Red Wine?" Laughter erupted. Not genuine laughter, but the echo of approval, the kind people give to someone they're afraid to disappoint. Marco's face turned a shade deeper than the spilled wine. His mouth opened, a half-formed apology caught in his throat. Leo wasn't finished. "It's okay, kid," he added, his voice laced with mock sympathy. "We've all got to start somewhere. But maybe not with a $4,000 bottle, huh?" The table roared again. Marco bowed his head slightly and whispered, "I'm so sorry, sir." He quickly dabbed the cloth, trying to make himself invisible. To everyone else, it was a forgettable moment. Just another night of celebrity banter. But 2 tables away, sitting alone in a black sweater and jeans, Keanu Reeves looked up from his glass of water. He had arrived quietly, no entrance, no entourage. He always came to these events like a whisper, observing more than participating. Tonight was no different. He hadn't touched the wine, hadn't laughed at any jokes, hadn't taken out his phone once. But he saw Marco. He saw the tremor in his hand, the redness in his ears, the look of someone who had just been publicly shamed in front of the most powerful man in the room. Keanu didn't flinch. He didn't shake his head or roll his eyes. He simply noted the scene, like a director watching a script unfold. The evening continued. Leo moved on to another joke. Someone mentioned a director's affair. Someone else bragged about a new Netflix deal. Waiters danced between tables, performing their own silent ballet. But Marco couldn't recover. He spent the rest of the night avoiding Leo's section, trading duties with a colleague whenever possible. He kept his head down, eyes low. His confidence, already fragile, had crumbled. Behind closed doors in the back kitchen, he had to splash cold water on his face twice just to stay composed. But the humiliation lingered. Not because of the wine. Not because of the laughter. But because of how fast people had joined in. And how no one, not one, stood up for him. Except, maybe, someone did. Just not with words. About an hour later, Marco was returning empty plates from a corner table when he noticed a hand gently raise a glass. It was Keanu. Marco hesitated, unsure if he'd be mocked again, but walked over anyway. "Yes, sir?" he asked quietly. Keanu didn't give a long speech. He didn't talk down. He simply looked Marco in the eyes, really looked, and said, "You're doing fine." 4 words. But to Marco, they landed with more weight than all of Leo's insults combined. Keanu nodded toward the glass. "Water, please. And when you have a moment, tell me your name." Marco blinked. "It's Marco, sir." Keanu smiled faintly. "Nice to meet you, Marco. I'll have whatever dessert you recommend." Marco was stunned. You want my recommendation?" "Sure," Keanu said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Marco quickly turned and hurried off, something shifting in his stride. For the first time that night, he felt seen. Not judged. Not laughed at. Just acknowledged. In the kitchen, he told the pastry chef that table 11 wanted the hazelnut soufflé. "And plate it well," he added. "It's for Keanu Reeves." Back on the floor, Keanu remained still. No phone. No smugness. Just quiet observation. He didn't need to be the loudest in the room. He never did. Meanwhile, Leo was now deep in conversation with an agent about a potential environmental documentary. The wine incident was already forgotten by him. But not by those who had watched. As the night ended, most celebrities filtered out with hugs and selfies and promises to catch up soon that no one would keep. But the kitchen buzzed with a different kind of energy. "Did you hear about Reeves?" one sous chef whispered. "Left a tip that's probably more than my rent." Marco didn't know about the tip yet. He'd find out later. Right now, all he knew was this. Someone who didn't owe him anything had reminded him he mattered. The tip that spoke louder. The rooftop party continued to buzz under the starlit sky. The city sprawled below like a blanket of glitter, but inside, the tension around one young waiter was palpable. Marco, the new guy who had endured Leonardo DiCaprio's sharp mockery earlier in the evening. His confidence was shattered, and though the party swirled around him in a whirl of champagne flutes and laughter, Marco felt trapped inside a bubble of shame. After that incident, Marco stuck to the edges, avoiding the center of the room, avoiding eye contact, and trying desperately to keep steady hands while serving. His every movement was watched, by guests, by colleagues, and most of all, by his own racing heart. His manager, a sharp woman named Sophia, noticed his distress. Pulling him aside during a lull, she said quietly, "Listen, Marco. We all mess up. But you need to keep your head up. The best way to get through this is to learn and keep moving." Marco nodded, but the sting lingered. The looks from Leo's table, the laughter, the whispering, it all echoed in his mind. Yet, even in his turmoil, a small light flickered in the form of one silent observer, Keanu Reeves. Keanu's presence was almost unnoticeable throughout the evening. Unlike many stars who drew crowds or demanded attention, Keanu sat calmly, sipping water, occasionally smiling softly, his eyes always observing. To many, he was just another guest. To those paying attention, he was a quiet force. When the party was nearing its peak, Keanu caught Marco's eye and gave a subtle nod. It was the kind of recognition that felt like an anchor in a storm. Marco's heart lifted slightly, but the moment was fleeting. Not long after, Keanu motioned for Marco to come over. "Marco, right?" Keanu's voice was calm, warm. "Yes, sir," Marco replied, swallowing his nerves. Keanu smiled gently. "How's your night been?" Marco hesitated. The honesty was sudden. "Hard, to be honest. I'm new here. I'm still learning." Keanu nodded, listening intently. "It shows you care. That's the important part." Marco found himself opening up more than he expected, telling Keanu about the pressure, the spilled wine, and the embarrassment. Keanu didn't judge. He just listened. When it was time for dessert, Keanu asked, "What do you recommend?" Marco, surprised but encouraged, suggested the hazelnut soufflé, the dish he felt most proud of. Keanu ordered it, asking that it be served with care. When the soufflé arrived, Keanu took a bite and smiled. "Delicious. Thank you, Marco." As Keanu prepared to leave, he handed Marco the bill folder. Marco glanced inside, expecting the usual tip, a few dollars, maybe. But what he found was staggering, a $5,000 tip and a handwritten note. Kindness lasts longer than applause. Marco stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. The note wasn't just a tip, it was a message. Backstage whispers spread quickly. One of the kitchen staff secretly snapped a photo of the note and quietly shared the story with colleagues. Suddenly, Keanu's silent kindness became the talk of the restaurant staff. For them, it was a beacon, a reminder that respect and humanity could exist even in the high-pressure world of fame. The next morning, news hadn't yet leaked to the public, but within Hollywood's backstage circles, the story of Keanu's gesture grew. Meanwhile, Leonardo DiCaprio, who had brushed off the incident as a joke, remained unaware of the ripple effect his words had created. Marco, however, was transformed. The kindness he received sparked a new confidence. It was as if the weight of humiliation was lifted by a single act of grace. Over the following days, he found himself walking taller, greeting guests with renewed spirit, and even sharing the story quietly with close friends. But what no one expected was the quiet shift in the restaurant staff's attitude. Suddenly, Marco was seen not as the nervous new waiter, but as someone worth watching, a reminder that even small moments can change lives. And for Keanu Reeves, the night was just another chapter in his quiet mission to uplift those often overlooked. Silence that shamed a star. The days following the rooftop party had a quiet but powerful ripple effect within Hollywood circles, especially among those who worked behind the scenes, the waiters, the chefs, the assistants, and the staff who rarely made the headlines. Among them, Marco's story spread like wildfire, a symbol of respect and kindness in an industry often criticized for its ego and entitlement. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the buzz reached a small charity event held at a well-known Los Angeles art gallery. The event aimed to raise funds for emerging actors and crew members struggling to find their footing. Many celebrities attended, not for the cameras or media spotlight, but to genuinely support a cause they believed in. Leonardo DiCaprio and Keanu Reeves were both on the guest list. The industry insiders whispered about the recent incident, the mocking at the rooftop party, and Keanu's generous tip that had since become something of a legend backstage. The air was thick with anticipation. Would there be a confrontation? Would Leo acknowledge the episode? Would Keanu speak up? As the guests mingled, the staff prepared refreshments, and the mood was hopeful yet tense. Leonardo, dressed in a sharp dark suit, was charming as always, laughing and engaging with a circle of producers. But behind his easy smile, some noticed a flicker of unease, a subtle awareness that the story had caught on in the industry. Keanu, meanwhile, kept to the sidelines, quietly shaking hands and exchanging warm words with a handful of attendees. His presence was calm and unassuming, but those who saw him up close could feel the quiet strength he carried. It was near the snack bar that the inevitable moment came. Leonardo approached Keanu, breaking through the crowd with a practiced ease. His voice was light, almost teasing. "So, I hear you're the waiter whisperer now," Leo said with a grin, the reference clear to those listening. Keanu met his gaze steadily. There was no smirk, no challenge, just quiet honesty. "We all have a spotlight, Leo," Keanu said softly. "It's just a matter of how we use it." The words landed heavier than anyone expected. A hush fell around them. The surrounding assistants and crew who overheard exchanged knowing glances. Keanu's message wasn't a rebuke, but it was unmistakable. Leo's smile faltered for a moment. He shifted his weight, eyes flickering away briefly before clearing his throat and changing the subject. The moment passed quickly, but its impact lingered. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Marco was preparing for his next shift at the restaurant. But this time, things felt different. Earlier that day, he'd received an unexpected call from the restaurant manager. "We want you on the full-time catering team, Marco. Your professionalism and your story, it's inspired everyone." Marco felt a surge of pride and disbelief. The same restaurant that had witnessed his public embarrassment was now offering him a chance to grow, to build a career among Hollywood's elite. What made it more meaningful was the subtle but unmistakable influence of Keanu's recommendation. Though no one spoke openly about it, the staff knew that behind the scenes, Keanu had quietly advocated for Marco. At the charity event, Keanu mingled with a group of young actors, sharing words of encouragement and wisdom. His reputation as not just a talented actor, but as a genuinely kind person, was reinforced. Meanwhile, Leonardo was left to reflect. The incident, once brushed off as a joke, had become a mirror. A reflection of behavior that some admired and others quietly condemned. The silence Keanu maintained, his refusal to publicly shame or criticize, was louder than any outburst Leo could have delivered. It was a lesson in humility, grace, and the power of kindness. Back at the restaurant weeks later, Marco flourished. His confidence grew, his steps were steadier, and he carried himself with a newfound dignity. The hazelnut soufflé became his signature dish to recommend, and he told the story of the night with humility, always emphasizing the lesson he'd learned, not just about serving food, but about serving respect. For Keanu Reeves, it was one more moment in a long life of quietly changing the world around him. And for Leonardo DiCaprio, it was a reminder that sometimes, the loudest lessons come in the form of silence. In a world obsessed with fame and loud voices, Keanu Reeves showed us that true strength often speaks softly. By choosing kindness over cruelty, respect over ridicule, and humility over arrogance, he taught a silent lesson that resonated far beyond a single night. Because sometimes, it's not what you say, but what you don't say, that changes everything. If this story moved you, don't just watch, make your voice heard. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is true power, and subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories that inspire and surprise. And tell us in the comments, what's the quietest lesson you've ever learned that changed everything?